It comes from the people who want to create these things and not just the people who the system has allowed to create these things. The games themselves embedded a lot of diversity, embodied a lot of diversity, and the designers and the teams behind them represented a lot of diversity.
It must be really hard to think of unique stuff that no one has done before. And yet, when you watch Day of the Devs, you get games that are doing things that having a unique concept or a unique idea behind them.
That's where imagination fails even the indie developers. They just need the imagination to think, how do we make this game as accessible to everyone as possible? The caniplaythat.com website has literally every kind of accessibility feature possible.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host Alex, and I'm joined by my friends Jem and Matt. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
This week, we're going to be talking about a gaming showcase known as Day of the Devs. I wanted to do a deep dive into Day of the Devs because compared to some of the other more mainstream gaming showcases that we have, such as Summer Games Fest and the PlayStation ones for different consoles, it just feels more creative and appealing to me in terms of the games that it showcases. What about games that maybe weren't so interesting to us, and why? Did you have any of those listed?
The games that didn't speak to me necessarily were that Big Walk one. Just felt a bit... I prefer going for just an actual walk.
Yeah.
And just the peace and quiet of the countryside. I like that, even though I live right next door to a motorway. The other one I didn't quite like was Mixtape, because there's nothing worse than being stuck listening to someone else's music when you don't like the same music.
Yeah.
And because music is such a...
I really do like all that music. So I was like, when they listed it, I was just like, oh my God, that's my teenage mixtape.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so it basically means it'll be like a musical. Anything where the music is a core part, it really, well, for me, I still haven't found my way into musicals generally, but I'm pretty sure this wouldn't suit me. But again, like if we bought every one of the games on this list, there's 25 games, it would probably be like £250 to buy all of them if they were at release. And in 2 years' time, they'll be much less than that anyway.
Indeed.
Or you can buy Madden, FIFA, and Call of Duty in 1 year for the same price.
Yeah.
And so that's the beauty of indie games, is that it doesn't matter how bad one is, you're not going to be paying through the nose for it.
That's such a great point, Matt. Definitely. I had a few similar ones on my list of not so interesting games, mainly because of the gameplay is ones like types that don't appeal to me. But that's not to say that they won't appeal to other people, of course. There's things like Blighted by Drinkbox Studios, and I got the overwhelming impression that was very much a Hades, and that's not really a type of game that I'm very much into. Possessors by Heart Machine and Powerhouse Animation. That was, again, looked more like a sort of turn-based type thing. There was some interesting animation in it, but I think the overall gameplay was just a type that didn't appeal to me. Again, Mixtape not quite on my level, but I can definitely see it appealing to some people. Moonlighter 2, The Endless Vault, I felt was very much a roguelike, and it might maybe have some, well, not necessarily repetitive game loops, because that's the point of a roguelike. But yeah, it just didn't quite capture my attention. Marvel Cosmic Invasion, again, not into that. But interestingly, it was my partner Tom's most favourite of all of the games, because he's massively into Marvel comics. So he was really excited, particularly about the bits with Ninja Turtles in. So he's very excited about that one. Neverwake, I thought was quite interesting, by Cold Blood Inc. But I'm not sure I'd play it all the way through. But I felt like it gave me the impression that it was like a Stardew Valley horror type game, which I wondered why it might appeal to you, Jem. Because I know you love
They
Stardew
called it
Valley.
a horror life sim.
Yeah.
Put like an exclamation mark and a question mark next to it. Honestly, I'm going to have to read you some of my notes games because they're hilarious. But yeah, I thought it reminded me of, Stardew Valley, but also Chrono Trigger, which was probably one of the games, the first console game that I ever played properly, and I played that all the way through and really enjoyed it. This was really similar to that, but yeah, it looked like it might be quite interesting, but it was like, I don't know, because it was a farming and a fighting game, and then it's this horror life. I'm like, this is a clash of a lot of genres here.
It is a lot. But it was interesting. I think all of the concepts are really creative and surprisingly unique. Surely it must be really hard to think of unique stuff that no one has done before. And yet, when you watch Day of the Devs, you get games that are doing things that maybe are similar to other games, but are having a unique concept or a unique idea behind them. So that's one of the things that I like most about it, is that it is providing you with these new ideas as well. Another one that was on my not so interesting to me list, Ratan by TBT Ratata Arts. That was a Japanese company. It's a rhythm game, essentially, and I'm not so into those. But the music that accompanied the whole trailer was grating in the extreme. I'm sorry to say. It sounded like, I thought of something I could say, but I've completely forgotten. It's a little bit like a children's TV show, but gone off the rails a little bit. It was just really grating. That one was a bit much. I think it was a little sensory overload for me. Another one that was intriguing, but probably one that I wouldn't play for more than 5 minutes, is Pocket Boss by Playables. And it's basically about manipulating graphs and charts. They're basically alive and you have to do things with them to move on, but they move in surprising ways and do surprising things. But again, it's not something that would make me think, oh, I must play this. But it might be fun for people who work with spreadsheets all day. I don't know. Maybe it's like a busman's holiday for them or something. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. And this person obviously really loves data. He's behind it and wants to play with that within games as a media. But it's not something that I think would appeal to me to play. And then the final one I have is Off by Mortis Ghost / Fran Gamer. I think it has been previously released, but it's being re-released for the Switch and a couple of other consoles. It's got a sort of horror-y graphic type animation, and it's very much a turn-based combat sort of genre. But yeah, those games are interesting to watch, I think, but they're not ones that I would play personally. If anyone has any thoughts on that list, please feel free to jump in.
I think those games probably came low on my list as well. I have actually played Undertale. I have got Undertale and I played it, but I haven't managed to get into it. I know it's very popular and gets a lot of good reviews, but it just didn't quite grab me. And I do think that maybe it's just the graphics that have done that for me, and the way that a game looks is really important. It doesn't have to be really fancy graphics, but it has to. I don't know. I couldn't say what it was.
Like with Stardew Valley and like other games like this, the ones that aren't that stereotypical futuristic gaming experience. I don't know how you start making a game like that, because when you start making something like Stardew Valley, the decision to have it be a 2D top-down thing and that turn out to be the perfect format for it is quite mind-bending to go, right, having an idea for a game and then it feels like a big leap to go, we're going to make a game and we're going to make it look like it's on a Game Boy. This is the perfect format for our game, rather than make it look like a more modern one. So Hades is a top-down game as well, but it's got this very dynamic and stylized art system, whereas this one just looks like it's from a Game Boy. But it works.
Yeah. I thought the one that was a bit Hades-like, I thought was quite nice because it had the sort of Hades style, but then it also had this like a comic book style in the scenery. So they were leaning into the low end of the graphics. It's not hyper real, so that they are leaning into that. I don't think I would play the game. Mixtape. I thought Mixtape looked a lot like Life is Strange.
Yes.
It had a sort of Life is Strange feel to it, and it was lots of skateboard. And then this sort of 80s feel. I think what came across with the whole showcase was that all of the people were really passionate at what they were working on. I think that's what you're trying to put your finger on there, Matt. You know, that these people are doing these weird styles or these weird concepts or these things that we just feel are very different from what your sort of mainstream and your big publishers are doing. And it's because these are their babies. They really care about this stuff. I can't remember which game it was. There were these two guys in an apartment.
Yeah. I think at the end they drank some milk together, didn't they? Yeah. It's all very strange.
It was weird, but you could see that this is a labour of love. These are our passion projects, and that's what gives them the energy, I think, to put these things together, and the belief that, you know, I'm not going to use fancy graphics, or I am going to have a little boy in a tyre.
So, obviously, Day of the Dead is all about supporting these independent developers who put their heart and soul into these projects. And sometimes they might need a little help with sponsorship. An interesting development is that Day of the Dead is now a non-profit. Would you say, necessarily, that it is compromised by having to take corporate sponsorship? And I've given you the names of some of the main sponsors. So, PlayStation itself, Razer, Bloomhouse Games, X-Solar, and potentially also Netflix Games as well, which will sponsor the whole showcase. Do you think there's a compromise that's being made there, or is it more about balance? Because obviously a lot of these developers in these games couldn't get off the ground without the help of some of this sponsorship.
I think as long as they don't own any of the studios, because what has been proven is the big company will buy up a studio, a very small studio, and say, all right, we'll give you tons of funding and you can create the thing that you want. And then they take your intellectual property and fire everyone. And so if they're supporting a showcase, they're not going to be making tons of money off this showcase. And none of the games on this list, it would be very unlikely that they're going to be the next Stardew Valley, but then I could be surprised. But I don't think it's big enough to be compromisable necessarily, because if it's the E3 or the Unreal showcase or the Xbox showcase, that's the built-in capitalism arm of things. Whereas this stuff is so small scale that I don't think they'd... I just think it's fine. I just think that it's probably okay. And if it's not okay, then the amount of damage it can do is negligible.
Yeah. It was a devil's advocate question, really. But yeah, do you have similar thoughts, Jem?
Yeah, I thought there was quite a few sponsors and they were from different corners of the industry. So I think that in itself, they cancel each other out. Essentially, these games, although as Matt says, minimal, but these games are competitors to the bigger games, but they're working on very different levels. And also, as Matt mentioned earlier, one of the ways that the more mainstream businesses can support the industry and ensure diversity of concepts and the sort of fertile ground, really, for games going forward is to put money into it. And this is a way that they can actually do that. So I think that it has to be questioned. I think you're right to ask the question, Alex, and it is something that we should always be keeping an eye on. But yeah, I don't think it's a problem. I think it's good because I think what it says is that the mainstream games industry is taking the indie industry seriously, or at least acknowledging that it has a place. And I think ultimately that's a good thing. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, having watched and/or read about Day of the Dead, do you feel like the indie game scene is more inclusive and accessible than mainstream gaming as a whole?
Do you mean as gamers or as developers?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I guess both, if you're happy to explore.
I think in terms of developers, definitely 100%, 100,000%, because literally if you've got a laptop with a low tier graphics card, gaming graphics card, then you can use the Unreal Engine 4 at least, and that is still, there are plenty of games on the Unreal Engine 4 that look better than some of the ones on the Unreal Engine 5, because there is nothing worse than a game that is trying to be really like graphically good. So there are some games using the Unreal Engine 5 that look like they could have been made on the Unreal Engine 2.
Oh, no.
There you go. You've wasted all of that processing power. If you have any idea how powerful my graphics card is, and you're managing to waste all of it doing your stupid shit looking game. Whereas, yeah, as long as you've got a reasonably powerful laptop, you can make a game with the Unreal Engine. And although it's quite an accessible in terms of piece of technology, in terms of learning to use it and using it compared to creating your own engine, it's not necessarily, again, like the difference between real accessibility, which is allowing anyone to use a certain thing in a way that is best for them. I don't think they've put as much energy into that as they should, but it is a tool there that is free to use for anyone, so it's accessible in terms of for the developers in that way. But as for gamers, I don't think it's any more accessible, purely because the only two games that I've seen that have done accessibly how it should be done is God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us 2 and the remake version of it. But it's not because it's still a lack of, that's where imagination fails even the indie developers, because you just need the imagination to think, how do we make this game as accessible to everyone as possible? And then there is literally a website, the caniplaythat.com website, that has the exhaustive, literally every kind of disability accessibility feature possible it's got a list breaks down the different types of disability and the different ways in which they need to be accommodated. And everything on that list is so manageable to implement. It can be as simple as changing a few font sizes on the text, or changing the colors of some things and slowing down time, and just it's the answer. It's a thing where the answers are there. You don't need to be at the bleeding edge of technology to make your game accessible. You just need to have the imagination to go, oh yeah, while we're at this, they could do it. And again, they shouldn't have the judgment on them that should be on AAA game studios. But it would be nice if we could see that kind of the accessibility revolution happening now in the indie scene. That's what I'd really like to see.
That's a very comprehensive one, thank you. Jem, I'll do a quick follow-up for you. Since Matt has answered the accessibility part, do you feel like indie games are more inclusive in the way that they are presented to gamers? Do you think that their stories are more inclusive than mainstream games?
If this showcase is an example of what's out there, then yes, we've got games covering all sorts of genres, and there were lots of different looking people in the games, and lots of exploring of different lifestyles and different issues and different topics. So I do think that seemed to be a very positive thing coming through in these games. Also, the people who were making them, the teams that were put on the show to present their games, they were all very diverse and very different from one another. It wasn't just a bunch of straight white men, it was a whole sort of range of people from all around the world, and very clearly from all around the world. And there were people there who were obviously really good media headed people who were happy to do something fancy, like these two guys in their apartment drinking milk. Or there was one person, I can't remember which one he'd done, but anyway, just standing outside in a field, and so there was clearly a variety of people who are creating these games. And again, I think that's because these are made with love. It comes from the people who want to create these things, and not just the people who the system has allowed to create these things, if that makes sense. Yeah, I felt like the games themselves embodied a lot of diversity, and the designers and the teams behind them represented a lot of diversity from what I could see.
Brilliant. I felt the same way, definitely. I definitely got a sort of, like many of the indie games that were showcased, a sort of cozy feeling from the whole showcase, as if we were coming into a circle of friends and they were all just bigging each other up, and it was just really nice. A really nice way, I think, to present the showcase as a whole. So I think we'll end the episode with one final question, which is, how would you like games to be showcased in the future? And as a sub-question, do you miss E3 or other similar game showcases of the past?
I think that this summer of games conferences has shown that we don't need E3 anymore, because we had the Xbox showcase, we had the Unreal Engine showcase, big, massive things, especially the Unreal Engine one. The sheer power and majesty of the Unreal Engine is just getting bigger and bigger, and thanks to Fortnite, they're never going to run out of money for it. Even if they could give it to free for everyone, and it would probably, wouldn't even scratch the bottom of their coffers of money. And then you can have little streams like this, and you don't need to book out a massive theatre and have really expensive hosts flown in from all over the world. You can just, if you can stream, just need to be with camera and a microphone and someone who knows how to set this kind of thing up, and you can go.
E3 has an interesting place in my heart because when I was working at EA, Electronic Arts, E3 was massive then. E3 was where everyone in the games industry wanted to be. And even if you weren't presenting anything, you wanted to attend it. And my housemate did go. And I was always hoping that I was going to be able to go. And I entertained for probably about a year that the idea that I was going to work in the games industry, but then I moved out of London, and there were only 2 places in the country where you could work in the games industry at that point, and it was down south around London or up north, and I ended up in the middle. So it's like the worst of all places for games stuff. So that dream disappeared, but I actually cannot stand those kind of big fancy events, and I think it's such a lot of back patting and ego massaging and all of that, and it just doesn't appeal to me at all. So I can understand why people want to have a big fancy flashy event where they can stand on a stage and tell 1,000 people all about why their game is so brilliant. And I understand why other people want to go to see that, to be the first people to see this unveiling. But we don't really live in that world anymore, I think. And I really liked that this Day of the Devs showcase was something that was accessible by the fact that it allowed all these people who probably wouldn't have been able to physically get to an event because it would have been too costly for them, and yet they were still able to take part in this, and they were still able to put their own little spin on what they were doing. No, I think we can manage without E3, and I think that I would like to see more of these smaller events. We've moved to this online these online systems, and I think it's a positive thing in general.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it's interesting what you said about E3, because I think when I was becoming a gamer, I first learnt about new games through things like magazines and getting demo discs, or even TV channels. I think there was one called G4, correct me if I'm wrong, but I used to watch that as well occasionally. And then when E3 started happening, I was like, I'll watch this and I'll know what game's coming out. And then, of course, everything changed. And now we've got lots of different streams from lots of different people. And I think E3 has that nostalgia. It is very much of its time. It represents a particular time in the gaming community. But I think times have moved on now, and we connect and showcase things in different ways. And having these different streams is a good way of doing it, because then you can find ones that appeal to you rather than just having one big one, because it gives space to developers that couldn't otherwise have been in E3 because they're not considered big enough to be there or whatever else, or there wasn't enough room to fit them in on the schedule. So I think it's good having a wide array of different showcases, and I'd like to see lots of similar things to Day of the Devs in the future, because we need to give a platform to those who are perhaps more marginalised within the gaming developer community and within the gaming community in general. So I would like more of it, please. And I look forward to next year. Thank you both for joining me in this discussion all on Day of the Devs. I think it's really nice to be able to reflect on it now, with some of the games coming out very soon, and just get your thoughts on it. And I'm really glad that I've introduced you to it, Jen, because I didn't realise you hadn't watched it before, so that's nice. So yeah, unless anyone else has anything to say, I'll get my teeth in a minute. I think I'll call the end of the episode and welcome you to come back any Thursday for more from us. And thank you very much for watching and listening. See you next time. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.